Welcome to Relentless Pressure, Stories of Resilience. I'm your host, Giancarlo Granda, and today we have an extraordinary guest who's reshaping the landscape of commodities markets. Join me in welcoming Noah Healy, the brilliant mind behind COORDISC. Welcome to the podcast. So it's Relentless Pressure, Stories of Resilience. That'll be the theme of the podcast. Give the audience a little introduction on yourself.
Sure. Well, my name is Noah Healy. Was born and raised in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I'm a recreational mathematician. My interest is computational mathematics. It's also where I make my profession in algorithm development and programming business systems. And for the last decade or thereabouts, I've been working on a project where I discovered a better way to do price discovery for commodity markets. And so,
Well, what does that mean? Explain to someone who doesn't know what commodity is, and how is your approach better
sure.
than what already exists?
So, people in economics usually talk about supply and demand, and the idea is that the market should sort of naturally cause supply to match demand. Well, the way that happens is through price. So, if eggs cost, $3 a dozen, then there'll be some amount of eggs that get produced and there'll be some amount of eggs that get bought, and hopefully that those two numbers will be the same. If if at $3 a dozen, you can't make the amount of eggs that people want, when you go to the grocery store, there'll be no eggs on the shelf. And if $3 a dozen, people don't really want eggs very much, then eggs will start spoiling in grocery stores, and farmers will eventually be told that the gravy train's over, and you got to figure out how to make these things cheaper if you want to sell them. And so this back and forth is what goes on. Now, we usually talk about these things in sort of abstract terms, like it just happens magically, but what we've actually had for centuries now is formalized systems of trade where we completely normalize everything. So you're not buying iron or cotton or corn. You're buying shipping containers full of a particular grade of the exact product you want, that's in one of designated bonded warehouses, or will be at a certain place at a certain time. And so all the dickering that you might ordinarily do when making a deal with somebody goes away. And the only thing that's left to dicker about is, well, how much and how much, what price and what quantity. Uh, and so if you've ever heard the term futures market, or
Yes.
if you've ever seen the stock market, for anyone out there, that's what's going on. They've purified the exchange down to just this how much for how much. And what the marketplace does, their price discovery mechanism, is that uh, as these trades get processed, the trades that happen get published. And so you can't sort of see what the price is, but you can see what the price was. And because the market's operating microsecond by microsecond, you can see what the price was as much as a millionth of a second ago. And so that is how the current system works. Um, because people don't really care about what the price used to be, and people don't really even care very much about what the price is right now. People mostly care what the price in the future. A system of futures was developed where we use that exact same system, but we shift the time. So rather than the deal being made for right now, the deal is made for next month or next week or 3 months from now or 6 months from now or 5 years from now, and so on. And so what winds up happening is you have these sort of floating markets in particular times in the future. And if you've ever heard triple witching or quadruple witching,
No, I've never
uh,
heard of that.
this is a term that's used in the industry. There are specific dates essentially that are used to coordinate across these things. And so a triple witching is when three large categories of assets will all have their futures contracts come due at the same time. Quadruple witching is when four of them happen. You'll find that large market moving events that are crazy and get reported in the news happen a little bit more often around witching times because everybody's scrambling to cover whatever bets they may have made in the past. And this is something that happens roughly once a quarter. So what I say is that basically those kind of witching hour times are when the rubber's meeting the road, when it actually matters. And so I've created a system that combines a prediction negotiation market where people can set day by day, hour by hour, maybe even minute by minute if you're talking about electricity, where prices are heading, and then a bulk clearinghouse style marketplace where people can take on these deals that have been pre-negotiated for them. And so by separating these two things, we create an environment where the cost of trade can be reduced and the returns on information can be increased. And since those are the two big things about the marketplace, people that make this stuff or use this stuff commercially want low cost of trade because that's a cost of them doing business, and their businesses become more profitable the lower the trade costs are.
Right, more
Whereas
profitable and efficient.
Exactly. Whereas people that have information are looking for ROI. Everyone would rather be, Warren Buffett than some schmo that's got his money in a savings account. So my model allows basically Warren Buffett to be a piker. You can create an environment where the average person can expect um, to do better than he's doing. Now that's because you only get paid for helping. So people that stupidly optimistically throw money in without any knowledge are going to find that it vanishes very quickly within this system.
So this system that you developed, is this something that you have to patent?
I don't have to, but it is one of the strategies I've been pursuing. And
Walk us through that process of having to file for a patent.
absolutely. So, and things have gotten recently weird on that too. So the process of filing a patent, I wanted to get a patent attorney to help me with this. And so I filed what is called a provisional patent, and that gives you a 1-year window. The first question you'll be asked by sort of every patent attorney or patent agent is whether or not this idea is public. So if you invent a better mousetrap and you put a story in the school newspaper about it, you have just lost your patent rights. It's now public information. That information will serve as what's known as prior art for your attempt to patent it. So that's a little weird thing, but anyhow.
Well, I guess that's why corporate espionage is such a big deal. Protecting trade secrets such as
uh,
patents.
yeah, well, so trade secret and patent are actually two separate concepts in IP.
Hmm. How
And
so?
so trade secret is a thing that the US Patent Office also helps you recognize. Uh, Trade secrets are something that you can actually keep up forever. Things like the formula for Coke, WD-40 is a trade secret. Um, the Colonel's 11 herbs and spices, or whatever the slogan was or is. There's lots of things that can be trade secrets. In order to have something registered as a trade secret, you basically have to say, hey, I have a secret. I'm keeping it secret. And you don't actually reveal, I believe, what the contents of the secret is, but you do have to provide sort of recognition information. If the secret's out or something, then they have to be able to pick it out of a lineup. You can't say, hey, I've got a secret, and then once something's revealed, you're like, yep, that was the secret, trust me, go beat those people up for me. Like, that's not how it works. You have to be like, I have a secret that allows me to manufacture steel more effectively, and using freon or something. And then when somebody else steals your idea, you can go after them for it.
Got it. I didn't
uh
know there were two separate things.
yeah, yeah. many people sort of think of intellectual property as this kind of umbrella. The term itself exists to umbrella it, but most people's limit of familiarity with intellectual property is actually copyright, and in specifically copyright around the entertainment industry,
Right.
which has a very sophisticated set. So like if you appear in a movie, you could receive residuals like when it's on a cable channel like 20 years later potentially. um, that's not a federal law at work. That's why, like, screen actors and writers and stuff, that's why they strike, is to set the agenda for those negotiations of what will appear in standard contract language and in general, and will be, sort of negotiated around for those contracts.
And
So
how do you know? How do you know about all this? Do you have a background in law, or are these things that you've learned, or just by speaking to attorneys?
Speaking to attorneys has certainly helped, but yeah, when I decided I was going to be pursuing a patent, there's a book, I can't remember who it's actually by or what it's titled because names escape me, but it's relatively easy to find. It is still to this day the seminal work on patents, and it's by the guy who was like IBM's head of patent during their heyday, and Googling or DuckDuckGoing or whatever search engine you like for that string will probably get you to that book, because that's how I got it.
Is
Um,
it specifically on patents, or is it IP
it
in general?
is it is specifically on patents, but if you are looking for that stuff, you will be able to find a lot of other ancillary pieces of
Got it.
information as well. Uh, So the thing that distinguishes patents from other forms of IP is that it's very short term compared to all other forms of IP. But it's also, unlike basically every other form of IP, generalized. Uh, so if if you create a new cola that tastes pretty good, Coke can't come after you for getting the secret formula. Their secret formula isn't on carbonated beverages that taste pretty good. Their secret formula is on Coca-Cola. Um, if you write a mythic fantasy story about children going to school and being put upon by some dark evil wizard, uh, J.K. Rowling can't, show up and take all of your money. Like, there are stories like that that existed before her. Other
Right.
people
It's just a
wrote
it's a
similar stories.
variation of it.
Sure. Yeah. Now, if you wrote a story about, Barry Potterer, and
I think that's a little too
right,
close.
at some point you do get too close, uh, but if you just write your own story and it contains some similar themes or some similar motifs or whatever, you just created your own story, and that's perfectly fine. Uh, but patents are concerned with the world of invention, and in that scope, uh, you know, if you had a patent on a car and somebody, welded a ball to one of the fenders and said, "This isn't a car anymore because look, I've got this, useless metal ball on a fender, and I'm going to call this, a DAR, one letter ahead." And so it's not a car, and it looks different, so it's different. And you're like, well, it's got engines and wheels and steering and brakes, and like that's a car. So the patent does that. It creates that sort of window, and that can have good effects, that can have bad effects. Henry Ford, for example, one of the big reasons why he's America's sort of premier car manufacturer is because the Buggy Whip company had actually bought something called the Selden patent, where Selden had come up with the idea of, like, I believe, sticking a steam engine on a horse wagon, and the buggy whip companies had a lot of money, and they were interpreting that patent to imply that nobody could build cars in the United States without their permission, and they weren't having it. And so Ford was able to raise enough money in his initial go, not merely to build the factory and get the production line going for Model T. My party trick is that I can twist my forearms over so much that they'll crease in a bit.
It's quite the icebreaker.
Yeah, it's most people don't even understand that that's weird. Like they nobody's ever twisted their arm up and like that. For most people, it's actually pretty debilitatingly painful to
I'm sure it is.
reach the limit of your sort of arms twist length. But for me, my body mostly goes until you know, flesh runs into flesh, and so I have to be very careful about things like posture and stuff like that, because it's very easy for me to dislocate things.
Oh wow. How about hobbies?
Well, as I think I mentioned earlier, I'm a recreational mathematician. Computational math actually is my hobby.
Hmm.
Uh, Another thing I enjoy is reading.
Okay. What are some of your favorite books or book recommendations?
Uh, well, some of my favorite books actually are juvenile fantasy literature. And so going back to Harry Potter again, I can recommend the Young Wizards series, certainly the first five before she started rewriting after Harry Potter got famous, and the Dark is Rising sequence by Susan Cooper.
Okay.
So the first one is by Diane Duane, and the second one's by Susan Cooper. I would put both of those above Harry Potter for those interested in this. um, my other big interest is Silver Age science fiction, and Heinlein is far and away the master of that genre. Um, the only one, I suppose, what Orphans of the Sky is the only one that I would not give my full-throated recommendation of. It's good, but it's not great, and the rest of them pretty much are all
What
great.
makes it not great in your eyes?
Orphans of the Sky. So I believe that one, and there's another that's not part of his juvenile series, that's just a little below par, called Fifth Column. And I believe in both cases he got the idea for the story from somebody else. Um, and uh, and it doesn't quite work. Orphans of the Sky, I'm pretty sure that's what the title is set inside a spaceship, and we're given a sort of first person monologue of a character, and it's a generations, it's a life ship, it's a not FTL, interstellar travel, and they've reverted barbarism. So they don't even know that they're on a spaceship. They just think that it's the world. And they also have a massive mutational problems. Um, so like the leader of the mutant gang actually has two heads, both fully functional. Um, and the finale is ultimately that they reach their destination, and our hero actually has to sort of like control the computer and cause it to land, so they'll be able to redo. And it's just sort of a little on the messy side. Heinlein's usually very thematically good. He has much stronger drawn characters than that usually, uh, and he plays with his ideas in ways that are, um, a lot more satisfying and sort of well drawn. And his sort of character and motivations are generally, they say that science fiction isn't really about the science, it's about people. in science. And the thing that puts Heinlein in the top rank is that his people feel like people. And in Orphans of the Sky, we're
What do you
stuck
mean? What do
inside.
you mean by that? Just it's more realistic
It's the people are
in terms of the characteristics of the
in terms
people.
of the characteristics, yes. And this is in spite of the fact, his most famous character of all time is Woodrow Wilson Smith, usually known as Lazarus Long, um, a man who's been alive since the 1920s. Many of Heinlein's works take place in so far into the future, we're not even using the Gregorian calendar anymore. And because at some point during this cycle, time travel is actually developed. Lazarus Long is actually thousands of times older than the thousands of years difference than there is between his birth date and the actual setting of his later adventures.
All right, Noah, I'll definitely check out your recommendations. To wrap it up, I'd like to ask this question here. So, if you could give your younger self advice during difficult times, what would it be?
uh Stick to your principles. I mean, I'm kind of been the same person since I was 8. So I don't really know. um I've learned a lot that's pretty useful over the years, and transporting that knowledge back in time would be incredibly valuable. But buy Apple in the early 80s isn't really the it's almost certainly the best advice you could possibly
Right,
give, but it's not the kind of thing that that does you a lot of good.
right. Being principled is definitely a good. It's good. It's good to have, right? Have a strong spine during difficult times,
Uh,
knowing where you're going.
yeah, absolutely. And also, I think it's the only reasonable strategic choice,
Right,
because what's going to happen is sort of what's going to happen.
right,
There's one of you, there's 8 billion of everybody else. The universe is at least 300 billion light years across. Like most of what's happening isn't going to be what you are doing. So you need to be satisfied that whatever the outcome that comes about is, you did what you thought you were supposed to be doing at the time, and just what happens is what happens.
nice. I like it. That's good advice. All right, I think that's pretty much it. We've covered everything from your background in business to your personal side. I'll definitely be checking out those book recommendations. All right, thank you, Noah. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.